Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
And that's right, everybody. Welcome back once again to another edition of the Best Seat in the House podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rob Cramer, joined by my co-host, Daniel Bobo Curlin. And Dan, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing fine. For one thing, I gotta say, today as we're filming this show is the anniversary of one of the most epic moments in the history of New York sports, the 1994 Rangers winning the Stanley Cup. We gotta mention that, the anniversary of that day.
Absolutely, man. June 14th, 1994. That is a great call to start off this episode, too. By the way, actually, I don't know if you know this, too, but this is also another crucial date in the history of New York sports, Mets baseball, and pop culture, all rolled into one, because actually on this date, June 14th, 1987, Mets Phillies, this character named Cosmo Cramer and his friend Newman attended a Mets game at Shea Stadium where the Mets blew the game in the ninth inning because of a crucial Keith Hernandez error that allowed 5 runs to score. The Mets ended up losing the game, and on his way out, Cramer actually said to Keith Hernandez, who committed the error, "Nice game, pretty boy," to which Hernandez returned and spat in his direction. But it wasn't Hernandez. It was Roger McDowell.
Yeah, that was a wild. Jerry Seinfeld talked about with those very stories. He's heard that story so many times he remembers it, and he says, "Man, that was one powerful loogie."
And it turned in midair, mind you. So, just a definitely a historic day, June 14th in the history of New York sports, no doubt about that. But as we get back to our present day sports right now, Dan, we got a lot going on right now. The last 2 days, we've seen a champion crowned in the NBA, and we've seen a champion crowned in the NHL, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think we both know where this episode has to start. As you were at the game yesterday, right?
Yeah, I was at the game, like on top of a couple of days. I mean, the Mets can't anybody on this fucking team pitch. We scored a boatload of runs, yet still didn't win the games half the time. And even worse, our best player gets hurt. But Charlie Morton and the Braves fans were freaking cheering about it. That was even worse. I swear, as much as I'm upset at the Braves fans for doing that, next time the Braves are in town, I encourage Met fans not to attack Braves fans. Do not do that in any way. That just makes it even. It just doesn't make you any better than what they did. All right. I know we're all upset about how they reacted when Charlie Morton hit Pete Alonso by a pitch. Also, another thing, the Met fans, do not go after Charlie Morton. Pete Alonso had mentioned in an interview after the game that Charlie Morton went up to him and apologized to him, was telling him that it wasn't intentional. And they had a nice little discussion after the game. So that alone gives you enough reason not to do that, and don't do that to opposing opposing fan bases. Please, all right? We're in that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, man. No need to start anything with the other fan bases and everything. But, that aside, what a bunch of classless losers these Braves fans are who cheered Pete Alonso getting hit. What do they care if Pete Alonso is healthy or not? They beat the Mets all the time anyway. So what are they sitting here cheering that Pete Alonso gets hurt by Charlie Morton? And who I agree with you too. Charlie Morton's a pro, and Charlie Morton owned up to it and apologized to Pete. So you got to give him credit there. But you know what I want to see now too, though? I don't want to see fans retaliating against the Braves. I want to see our team retaliate against the Braves. How about our guys start throwing inside to the Braves' big-time hitters more? How about you knock Marcelo Ozuna or, Ronald Acuna down on his ass? I'd like to see that. But I'd also like to see the Mets. How about you back up your big bat like Pete Alonso and go out there and win a couple of games without him? Go out there, take some of the pressure off this guy, which this team has not done. And, we can backtrack to last week and talk about that all we want. And after the disaster of a series that we saw last week against Atlanta, and just the continuation of this crap over the weekend, where you thought maybe after Buck Showalter addressed this team and read everybody the riot act to a certain extent, you thought maybe this would straighten them out a little bit. But what's the big deal? They go out and win on Saturday, and then they lose again on Sunday where the offense doesn't show up. And then they lose again yesterday where the offense does show up, but the pitching doesn't. And all this says to me, Dan, right now, is that we're looking at a 500 team. And right now, they're not even that. But a 500 team to me is a team that when they're pitching good, they can't hit. And when they're hitting good, they can't pitch. So that's a 500 team to me, and it looks like that's what we're seeing with this Mets ball club right now, especially. And just to finish up on what you said, yeah, the main thing right now is the pitching has to figure it out. Our starting pitching has been terrible all year, and the faces of it have been our two $43 million aces, Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. And it's time that we start getting our worth out of them. And Verlander has to start tonight against the Yankees, right, Dan?
Yeah, exactly. It's about time he freaking does. Also, the Mets need to address the pitching situation at the trade deadline already. Stop ignoring it, especially our bullpen. It feels like we had no bullpen the entire game. It's like oh my God, here we go again. And then I was maybe yelling after when Lindor struck out. I was maybe yelling out, "You're killing me, Smalls." Of course, some Met fans thought that was a good line when I was yelling out because they picked up what I was quoting. Of course, the movie The Sandlot, which if you haven't watched that movie, definitely it's a classic comedy. I just feel like everyone could just relate to it because of stuff crazy shit they saw as a kid. So it's just a hilarious movie. It's a great movie. It's part of the double feature I do in my house the night before the baseball season starts. I watch Major League and I watch The Sandlot, and it's a great movie, and I've quoted it many times.
No doubt about it, man. Love those movies. That's a great tradition. And that's pretty much what you can be yelling to the Mets over and over again so far this season is "You're killing me," because this has just been such a painful season so far, so up and down. They've had a 5-game winning streak, they've had a 6-game losing streak, a 7-game losing streak. This team just is all over the place. And this has just been one of the most up and down Met teams that I can remember in recent memory, at least. But, real quick, I want to look at these lineups because then you got – and I understand the Mets don't have Pete Alonso. But look at this Yankees lineup the Mets could not keep down yesterday. I mean, you're leading off with this kid Bowers, who did make a great catch early on in the game, which in my opinion was complete luck. Just a just he did make a great catch though. But Jake Bowers is leading off. I mean, first off, just the fact that Jake Bowers is leading off is everything you need to know about this Yankees lineup. Now, Giancarlo Stanton, who hit a bomb yesterday too, he's back in the lineup at DH. A terrible. This guy Josh Donaldson looks terrible. He's hitting third, and he's hitting 149. Josh Donaldson has been terrible this season. Anthony Rizzo is cleaning up, followed by DJ LeMahieu. Kiner Falefa is playing center field. You know, Isaiah Kiner Falefa, shortstop by trade. They have him in center field now. Then Billy McKinney, former Met Billy McKinney. Trevino at third base, catching at 8, and then Anthony Volpe. I mean, this is a very, very weak Yankee lineup from top to bottom. I mean, there's maybe 3 or 4 guys you have to fear in this lineup. And the Mets gave up 7 runs to them yesterday, with Scherzer on the mound. And, you know, you have DJ LeMahieu hitting a bomb off of him over the Great Wall of Flushing, as Howie Rose likes to call it. And, you know, you got to say to yourself, what the hell is going on? Max Scherzer last year, in about 150 innings, gave up 13 home runs all year. This year, in 56 innings, Scherzer's given up 13 home runs. He has been terrible, Dan. I mean, I think you can, as bad as the Mets hitting has been at times this year, their inconsistency from Scherzer and Verlander have been one of their biggest problems to date so far this season, right?
Yeah, it's just like disappointing. It's like I just been scratching my head. Please don't mess this one up. I would normally expect to be like, yeah, this is and a Verlander. Now I'm not quite sure. It's irritating me that the fact that I'm saying this about these 2 guys.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, on top of that, I feel like we've seen a lot of really, really good out of Kodai Senga this year. We've also seen a lot of really bad. So even though Kodai Senga's numbers aren't too bad right now, I mean, his numbers are pretty good, actually. 6-3, around a 3.5 ERA. He seems to be one of those guys that, A, still hasn't figured out how to pitch on a 5-day schedule, and B, is like a 1-start good, 1-start bad type pitcher. I hope that's not the case, but that seems to be what his track record has been so far this season. And, you know, granted, we are still pretty early on in this year, but I mean, you know, the Yankees got it done. They came back yesterday, and then, you know, let's take a look at the Mets lineup right now. Sans Pete Alonso, as the Mets have Brandon Nimmo, and they bumped up Starlin Marte, the number 2 hole, and then dropped Jeff McNeil down to the number 3 spot. You know, I don't mind Marte in the 2 hole, Dan. What do you think about that? Because they pretty much had him there all of last year, and I feel like maybe Buck is trying to catch that lightning in the bottle again.
I feel that's a good decision there. Also, it's nice to see that Vienna is in a lineup. Really, they should not be let ride the bench and have him in the lineup. Get him those at bats. This guy, I don't want it to turn out to be a situation like Jeff Kent, who didn't quite turn out that he was kind of not used that much, and he became, if I'm correct, I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Well, Jeff Kent isn't a Hall of Famer, but he should be. I agree with your thought process there. He's got the most home runs of any second baseman of all time, and for some reason, the Hall of Fame still hasn't put him in yet. I think he will be one day, but unfortunately, still not a Hall of Famer yet. But yeah, I agree with you, man. I totally see those parallels that you're talking about, and you know, just to finish up on that Mets lineup, they got Lindor cleaning up, followed by Alvarez in the number 5 spot. So they finally put him in an RBI spot, which I like. They shift Brett Beatty over to the DH spot today. to get Eduardo Escobar back in the lineup at third base. Tommy Pham and Mark Vientos round out the lineup there. So not a bad lineup, but the pitching matchup today is Garrett Cole against Justin Verlander. So very, very tough matchup for the Mets. Obviously, Cole's 7-1, 2.84 ERA this year has really been on the money. And Verlander for the Mets, 2-3, the 4.85 ERA. Obviously, as we've discussed, has not been too great for the Mets this year, but he does have that history of dominating the Yankees, right?
Yeah, so hopefully it turns out well. Should be an interesting matchup. I mean, two former teammates who practically anchored a staff that just literally brought a lot of celebration to the city of Houston in 2017 at a time when they were dealing with Hurricane Harvey for that city, and they had something that they could be happy about when they're with all they had to deal with. I myself volunteered to load us a flight truck during that time, by the way.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Very true. And so we have a lot to there's a lot on the line for the Mets tonight now. I mean, if they lose this game to the Yankees now, they are just further burying themselves. Right now, the Mets are 31-36. Can you imagine that? The Mets are 5 games under 500, 10 games off the pace of the Atlanta Braves. Which, if you remember, by the way, last year on June 1st, the Mets led the Braves by 10 games. Now, a year later, plus 2 weeks, they trail the Braves by 10 games. So, who knows? It's you just got to hope that at some point the Mets figure it out and get themselves back on track. One thing that has disappointed me is Buck Showalter's reaction to a lot of this. Even last night, what did you think of Drew Smith getting thrown out of the game last night? There have only been 3 instances of this happening this year. One was Domingo Germán, where they didn't even throw him out of the game. They just let him wash his hands, and he was let back in. One where they obviously targeted Max Scherzer and had him thrown out of the game, which fucked up one of his best-looking starts of the season, and he really hasn't rebounded since then. And then last night, Drew Smith. Now, I really feel like Major League Baseball is fucking with the Mets here, and it's really pissing me off because now, if you remember, now Drew Smith is suspended for the next 10 games. He's being fined, and the Mets as a team have to play one man short for the next 10 days too. So what did you think of that decision? Because it seemed once again completely arbitrary and absolutely ridiculous to me that they threw this guy out before he even threw a pitch.
Yeah, that is just I'm upset about it. I just don't. Yeah, I feel like maybe the Loonigan might be. I might be printing out the pictures of Robert Manfred for him to take a nice little piss on.
I like that idea. We should print up something for Donovan's where you put Rob Manfred urinal cakes in all the stalls over there so everybody could piss on him because that's what he deserves, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would welcome that. Well, maybe we may have given Jimmy Jacobson over at Donovan's the idea. He's probably seeing this right now for all we know.
Well, feel free, Donovan's. If you like that idea, please take it because I would love it if somebody did that because Rob Manfred is the worst commissioner in sports. I said that he's worse than Goodell, he's worse than Adam Silver, and he's worse than Gary Bettman. He's the worst commissioner in sports, and he deserves to get that treatment. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Dan?
No, it's just funny.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe we should send this segment over to Donovan so they take that idea and run with it, right?
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, now we got to talk. We killed two birds with one stone today too, because we got the Mets and the Yankees out in one felt swoop as they're playing each other tonight. But I did want to talk to you about something me and you have been discussing for the last couple of weeks. The last night the Vegas Golden Knights win their first Stanley Cup. It was really cool here. I got some footage of the ceremony and them getting the cup for the first time. Obviously we were hoping that this playoff run would end with our New York Rangers hoisting the Stanley Cup. When that did not become a reality, and we got knocked out, one of the teams that I would have been happy to see win the championship at the end of the day was these Vegas Golden Knights. Dan, what were your thoughts watching them close out this last night with a very impressive 9-3 victory over Florida last night?
Well, I looked at the highlights after work because I pretty much went to sleep after the game, so I didn't really see anything. I didn't get a chance to look at any footage of what the celebrating was like because I was wondering what was that kind of be like, being the fact that Las Vegas is a city that's never won a single major sports championship. So there was a question to be wondering, like, is there going to be celebrating? Are they going to be rioting? Because all those little questions of how they're going to react to that. So I have didn't really get a chance to look up any footage or anything like that. I was just hard, but I did look at the highlights of the game, and that was surprising to see a blowout like that in Game 7. I have to admit they seem to get Las Vegas seems to get a better fan turnout during the regular season than I expected when I first heard Las Vegas getting a team. All I kept hearing in the comments of that announcement was fans in various people who lived in Las Vegas who grew up elsewhere were saying, "Oh, good, they can see their team for cheap." Pretty much, they actually looked like they got a nice turnout during a regular season than I expected.
Yeah, actually, and real quick, let's watch him take this Stanley Cup. Pretty cool little ceremony they had there.
Yeah,
Everybody reacting,
yeah,
right? I mean, you got to hand it to Vegas there, right?
yeah. I gotta hand it to them for that. I just have a feeling the parade's probably going to be on the Vegas Strip. Also, I have to admit, it does. Every time I see like a team like this that was a fan winning a championship, I kind of feel like I'm kind of just bridesmaid to the. It's like someone being a bridesmaid to the wedding.
Yeah, always the bridesmaid, never the. I kind of get the feeling you're saying, Dan, because unfortunately, we really, I mean, since 1994, we haven't get to see any. Well, I mean, actually, you've seen your Giants win a couple, but other than that, no Mets championships, no Rangers championships since 1994. For the Mets, 86, obviously. So, it's been a long drought, and even your Giants now too. I mean, that last one was 2011, so we haven't seen a New York team win a championship since February of 2012. So it's been a long time, right, man? And I think it's just about time that that one team in New York puts an end to that curse, right? Well, I guess Dan didn't agree. He'll be back in a sec. But until he comes back, let's just take a look at this.
They are a big part of you lifting that Stanley Cup.
What are your biggest impressions, Wayne, that you will take out of this 2023 Stanley Cup?
Time it happened.
Well, I was
I would
just so
love to
impressed.
see. I would love to see what that's like for once to see the Rangers win with the Stanley Cup again. There's
Yeah,
Ranger fans that don't remember 1994 that are
yeah,
eager
it's
to see
true.
it. Also, can the Mets freaking win a championship? Well, my mom's still around, so she's gonna be around for it. And the
Yeah,
same
come
thing
on,
with Mr.
Mets.
Malone. And the same thing with Mr. Maloonigan. Poor Mr. Maloonigan, he's a dog. The, the, you know, the dogs are right. I want him to be able to be around for it. I want to be able to carry him around the block like he's a championship trophy. You know, and like victorious.
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
to
I
try to
hear
carry.
you, man.
Yeah, want to hold him down the block. Victoriously hold my dog down as they walk down the block.
Exactly. But believe me, dude, I totally hear you. You want to celebrate the championship with him. Treat him like he's the Stanley Cup, whether it's the Rangers winning the Cup or the Mets winning the World Series. You just want to be able to enjoy that, or hell, even the Knicks winning the NBA championship. I mean, who would have thought that the Knicks, were this close, man? I mean, if not for an improbable Heat run, there's a good chance that the Knicks might have at least been in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then who knows what could have happened. Just like in 1999 when the Knicks went on their improbable run, and then unfortunately lost to the San Antonio Spurs. Um, so yeah, it's been a long time since one of our New York teams have closed the deal. The last New York team that even made it to a championship round was the Mets in the World Series in 2015. So,
Yeah,
it's about time,
exactly.
man.
And another little fact. Well, I kind of have certain opinions about the last two mayors of the city, but there had the previous mayor, not a single New York team won a championship during his administration. I don't recall that ever happening in history. A mayor during his time as mayor of New York didn't get to be a part of the city hall ceremony, the championship ceremony, during his time as mayor. I don't recall that ever happened. Can someone look up that stats of every mayor of New York in New York City history and what teams won a championship during their administration? Because I don't recall
Wow,
it ever happening during an administration.
that is an amazing. That really is an amazing thought right there, Dan. Yeah, I mean the only time I really could think that it would have even been possible is maybe between 78 and 86 when
Uh,
the
actually,
Yankees.
78. I think the Yankees
Yeah, well, the
won a
Yankees won the World Series in 78. The Yankees won the World Series in 78, and the Mets won the World Series in 86. But what I'm saying is
yeah,
that there was nothing in between. So maybe
yeah.
there's a chance that whoever was mayor at that time,
Well,
maybe
well,
Ed Koch or
well.
whoever it was.
Uh, Actually, Ed Koch, the Mets won the World Series during Ed Koch's administration,
Oh, so he was still there
according
in
to my memory.
'86.
Yeah, and he was there. Of course, the Giants won the Super Bowl during his time as mayor.
Hmm.
Giuliani
Hmm.
had the Yankee dynasty pretty much,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
had
Bloom.
and he had the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup. Bloomberg, the Giants won two championships. The Yankees won one championship.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's the
That's a
last.
good question. We'll
Yeah,
we'll have to
exactly.
look into that because then also it might even be um in there. Well, yeah, because then the Knicks won, and then the Rangers and the Knicks and the Jets won in '69 and '70. So yeah, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a mayor that was as unsuccessful sports wise as Bill De Blasio in the history of this city. So that's a really really good call, Dan. And as a matter of fact, we're gonna do some research on that, and on next week's episode, we'll definitely have the answer for that. So keep that in your back pocket. Very very good question there, Dan. I like that a lot. And with that, I think we'll keep it moving along here. As congratulations to the Las Vegas Golden Knights pulling that out. And you mentioned that they had a big time celebration out there, and we really haven't heard any noticeable problems there. No Philadelphia type shenanigans. However,
And
in Denver,
that doesn't surprise me. That surprised me that didn't happen because I mean it's freaking Las Vegas. I mean, how many times do you go to Las Vegas that people maybe had one too many? I'm just saying if you're familiar with Las Vegas, you know what I'm talking about.
You got that right, man. You definitely got that right. And you'd think that a city like Denver would be able to handle itself a little bit better too, but there have been reports there was a shooting at one of the championship celebrations. I saw about I think eight or nine people got shot after the Nuggets won their championship. So not a good start, Denver. It's time to work things out a little bit.
Yeesh. Don't people know how to like just go nuts and not become so destructive? Yeesh, at least in New York when we won championship, he's gone nuts, but it's not destroy property.
Yeah, well, and even worse, it would actually be an improvement if they were just destroying property. These guys are shooting each other. What the hell are you what the hell could be happening? You just won the NBA championship, guys. Sit back and enjoy it. You have, two of the most dynamic players in the sport who went out there and performed at just a incredible level and beat the Heat. And every time the Heat tried to mount a comeback, there was the Denver Nuggets just there to squash their momentum and just keep it going. What they did every single round this playoff. What do you think, Dan? I mean, you got to tip your cap to the entire Denver Nuggets organization because they had a hell of a season, winning their top seed, and then had a hell of a playoff run.
Yeah, I gotta give a lot of props to the Denver Nuggets. That was an impressive season from a team that flew very under the radar. I don't think no one predicted that the Denver Nuggets were to win an NBA championship. I'm pretty sure that, and I'm pretty sure if you did, anyone who did, probably got a nice one heck of a payout.
That's true. If you want to put your money where your mouth is and make a big bet in Vegas or Atlantic City, you're probably right, man. But yeah, you got to give credit to them. They're a good organization, and they've been a good, well-run organization for a while now. And it all just culminated with this championship. It reminds me a lot of when Toronto won their first NBA championship a couple of years ago. And because you like to see a fan base get that establishing championship. The Mets fans got that in 1969. Yankee fans got that way back in 1923. So I'm sure many people that saw that championship, or all people that saw that championship, probably aren't alive today because it was 100 years ago. But
correction. The Mets. I think the Yankees won a championship before 1923.
No, 23 was the first one. They got to back-to-back World Series in 21 and 22 to the New York Giants, but they lost both of them.
Yeah. I forgot about that one, but yeah, I forgot the first one they won in 23. Surprisingly, was that the first year of their stadium.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people forget too. That was the first year of Yankee Stadium, and that was the third straight World Series they appeared in. They appeared in 21 and lost to the Giants, and 22 and lost to the Giants. And actually, one of the big stars of that of those World Series for the Giants was Casey Stengel, who had a inside the park home run in one of those games, and had a pretty good World Series run against the Yankees, who he would obviously, as we all know, went on to manage in the 50s and, took the Yankees to new heights that not even they'd seen before. So very, very cool of the old professor there. And
and
yeah, yeah,
Casey Stengel has the very distinction of being the only person to have his number retired by both the Mets and the Yankees. As you know, he was the
yeah.
original Mets manager, and his number was retired after he retired from managing. Made him that that little bit of history there.
Very true, man. Which is also the reason why when Kenny Rogers joined the Mets, he had to wear number 73 because Casey Stengel's 37 was retired. So just a little factoids right here in the smack dab in the middle of this episode of Best Seat in the House podcast. And so, yeah, definitely want to give credit where credit's due. Now a big off season for the NBA as we turn our attention to the Knicks. As our attention always is to the Knicks and the NBA for the most part. But now that the champion has been crowned and the season and the tournament is over, time to turn our attention fully back to the Knicks and what their next moves are going to be. It's going to be a very interesting offseason, especially with no first-round pick in this year's draft. So a lot of pressure on Leon Rose and that Knicks front office to get things done. But while we're talking about Madison Square Garden, let's turn our attention to the other team at Madison Square Garden, because I'm sure you are well aware, Dan, that the Rangers finally, after more than a month, closer to 6 weeks of searching for a head coach, have finally named Peter Laviolette as their new head coach. Chris Drury really did a great job of, being thorough and, doing everything in his in his power to interview as many people as possible and get these guys involved. What do you think, Dan? Laviolette's a coach that's been around for a long time. Do you think that he is the right guy for this job?
I feel it is a big question mark. It is 50-50 that he is the right guy for this job, and it goes very well to hopefully maybe our expectation. Or it could go in complete disaster. This one's a relatively unknown because he's had a track record in the past, but it was like quite a long time ago, and he's been around. He's coached a number of teams over the years, so this one's more a question mark than it is answered.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, man. I I'll say this about Peter Laviolette is that I remember when he was the head coach for the Islanders, 20 years ago. And I remember being thrilled when the Islanders fired him after only 2 seasons because I thought he was such a good coach. And it really made me happy that the Islanders were dumb enough to get rid of him. And it proved, what a good coach he was, that as soon as he was let go by the Islanders, he was picked up by the Carolina Hurricanes and won a Stanley Cup, a year or two after that. He hasn't had that success since then. You got to give him credit. This is a guy who has he's taken 3 teams to the Stanley Cup final. This is a guy that took the Carolina Hurricanes, like we just mentioned. He took the, if you remember, Dan, do you remember the Rangers season? I believe it was 2009, where it ended on the last day of the year, and the Rangers lost in overtime to the Flyers and missed the playoffs because of that.
If I'm correct, that was 2010. The correction in that it was 2010, and
Yeah, it was
I
the
remember,
2009-2010 season.
and I remember like cursing up a storm the TV, and and not only that, during that time, my mom, I had to go to the supermarket to buy cream, and one of the things on the shopping list was cream cheese. Despite the and even though it was on sale, I did not want to pick up the Philadelphia cream cheese, but my mom insisted, "Gotta get the one that's on sale. Get the one that's on sale." I did not want to buy a product that Philadelphia fans wear a replica of the box on their head. I don't know if you've seen pictures of this. They wear replicas of the box of that cream cheese on their head. And
I've
you know
seen
the funny
this.
part about that? That product, Philadelphia cream cheese, was invented in New England by a company based in the New England area. The
That
product
is
was not
pretty.
even invented in Philadelphia. That brand of cream cheese has well, I forgot what cream cheese has as roots in, but I'm talking about the brand of cream cheese has no roots in Philadelphia except for the name of the product.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all that the Philadelphia fans would rally around something like that. That's not even from there. But yeah, so the only reason I brought that up was because Peter Laviolette was the head coach of that team, who they were the last team to qualify for the playoffs. They were the bottom team in the tournament, just like the Heat were this year. And he took that team all the way to game 6 of the Stanley Cup final. So you got to give him credit there. And he was also the head coach of the Nashville Predators when they went on their Stanley Cup championship run just a few years ago. They obviously didn't win, but they got pretty damn far too. So Peter Laviolette, a guy with a long history of coaching and having success. And unfortunately for him, he didn't have that success in Washington the last couple of years. He made the playoffs the first year, crapped out this year, but all signs point to, much like in Gerard Gallant's first year here, that things are going to go well the first year. It's how he and the team responds after that. So take that for what it will. I will say this though. I do want to read what Jim Dolan had to say about this, the Rangers owner. Now, we all know he doesn't really have too much of a vast knowledge of hockey, but this is what he had to say. He said, "I'd like to welcome Peter to the New York Rangers. Peter's impressive resume, which includes winning a Stanley Cup and advancing to the final with 3 different teams, has made him one of the most respected coaches in the league. As we move forward in our goal to consistently contend for a Stanley Cup, I am confident that Peter is the right head coach to lead our team." So that's a pretty ringing endorsement from Mr. Dolan. And just real quick before I get your take on this, Dan, this is what Chris Drury had to say. We are thrilled that Peter will be the next head coach of the New York Rangers. With Peter's extensive experience as a head coach in the National Hockey League, as well as the success his teams have had at several levels throughout his career, we are excited about what the future holds with him leading our team. So, 2 pretty strong endorsements of Laviolette, Dan. I know we've gotten to this a little bit, but just to wrap up, what is your feeling about this right now? If you had to call it right now, is this the are we going to look back at this like the Mike Keenan hire, or are we going to look back at this as the Brian Trottier hire?
Well, I feel like, if we're gonna talk about year one, I feel like year one it's gonna be at least a playoff appearance. Anything less than that would be a letdown. Year one. The big thing,
Oh
like
yeah.
you said, year two is gonna be a big telling, but I feel like year one it's gonna be at least probably a conference finals appearance.
Oh man, I mean, you'd hope so, especially with all the things that are going to be going into this season. I don't know if you've heard, but the word is that Patrick Kane did have that procedure on his hip, and that it's going to take about 6 months to recover from. So, word is that Patrick Kane is going to be looking to come in on a deal with whatever his next team is that is going to offer him the ability to come back probably in January of 2024. so he'll be back right after the calendar changes this year. Um, you could probably get him on a pretty reasonable deal. What do you think, Dan? Do you think that with a veteran coach like Laviolette now, bringing in a guy like you know, or bringing back a guy like Patrick Kane, do you think that that's the way to go, or should the Rangers really concentrate more on their younger guys and trying to bring in more grittiness?
I feel if you can get Patrick Kane on the right deal, probably go for it. If it's maybe a cheap deal, being the fact like the question mark, maybe a low risk, high reward kind of thing. Maybe you might have to do it. A lot of the good teams are not afraid to make that deal.
Yeah, yeah, it's true, and you're right too, because the good teams are the ones that can afford to make this deal. You can afford, especially a team like the Rangers, who are pretty deep right now. The Rangers can afford to say, "Hey, we're going to pay money for Patrick Kane because we know that as long as he's healthy, which he wasn't this past year when he was with the Rangers, that he's going to be a difference maker in the playoffs." And we saw, remember in that one game where Patrick Kane looked like Patrick Kane against the Devils, he was a difference maker all in himself. So you got to hope that if the Rangers do get him, that we see the best of Patrick Kane. It kind of reminds me of how everybody talks about how Aaron Rodgers had an off season last year. He had that broken thumb on his finger. He didn't really have the best relationship with his receivers. The Packers weren't really that good. So, all Jet fans are hoping that he could come back and have this big bounce back season this year, which is what us Rangers fans would be hoping that Patrick Kane can do, right?
Exactly. It's a move you need to make, and you gotta win that cup within that window. I feel like.
Yeah, and that window's still open. I mean, me and you have talked about in the past of this window with these young kids being open until 2025, right around there, 2024, 2025. So we're still in that area, and I know with guys like Shesterkin and all this young talent, Lafreniere, Kako, Keandre Miller, all these young guys who are going to be around for a while, that number can extend past 2025. But we're talking about when you are having this core right now of guys like Zibanejad and Panarin and, guys who are still all at the top of their game along with these young kids. That's where I really think you have to hit that window, right?
Yeah, exactly. You gotta hit this window. Come on, Rangers, do this. I want to be able to have to see that, and hopefully add to maybe more championship episodes I'm talking about. Hopefully somehow the Mets might bounce back and win this, and hopefully we can see a Stanley Cup championship. And
Exactly, man. From your lips to God's ears.
yep, exactly. Also, speaking of football, the I noticed that Saquon Barkley is playing hardball with the Giants lately. Like
It's funny you say that. Yeah,
I hear
it's funny you
word.
say that, Dan. Yeah, continue, please.
I hear word that he threatened to sit out the season, potentially causing a Marcus Stroman type relationship with the New York fans, to similar when Marcus
Yeah,
Stroman bailed out on the Mets in 2020.
yeah, you're
And
absolutely
that
right.
relationship got soured because of that. If
No doubt
I
about
hope
it. No doubt
I
about
hope
it.
and I hope Saquon, please don't do this, Saquon. We need you. Don't bail out on us. You don't want to sour this relationship with our city.
Yeah, that would be, in my opinion, a really, really dumb move for Saquon because he's talking about potentially sitting out the whole season now. Well, to be honest, I haven't actually heard him say that, but that's what reports have come out of Giants camp that Saquon is at least considering the idea of staying out, or staying away from the Giants all season if they don't pay him, which would just be such a dumb move. we saw this completely backfire on Le'Veon Bell just a couple of years ago. And if Le'Veon Bell, Le'Veon Bell got lucky in that sense too. The Jets were this desperate team that needed something to sell to their fans and needed something to sell to themselves too. So they gave all that money. They backed up the Brinks truck for Le'Veon Bell, and it didn't work out. Bell, ended up having one season here. He played an extra 2 or 3 games the following year, and then he was gone. And that was it. I think Le'Veon Bell completely derailed his NFL career by sitting out that season. He cost himself 15, 20 million bucks, whatever the franchise tag was that year. And, Saquon Barkley sitting here saying just a couple of days ago, I'm not asking for much. I'm only asking 10 to 12 million. Oh, that's a lot of freaking money. I'm sorry, Saquon. I know you might not think it's a lot of money, but you're a running back that in a position that in the NFL, look, the fact of the matter is that a lot of these guys are getting drafted right now and coming out and having similar seasons to what guys like Saquon Barkley and even the Jets guy who got hurt last year, Breece Hall, that you could get a guy like that in a later round now. It's not as crazy as it used to be, where people aren't throwing money at running backs the way they used to. We're not seeing guys get paid like Adrian Peterson anymore. You know what I mean? So I think Saquon really has to understand that maybe that Le'Veon Bell contract we saw a couple of years ago was the last of those giant running back contracts that we're going to see, and he should just be happy with what the Giants can pay him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Be glad you're getting paid somewhere. If you're getting paid, you got a chance to be on a team that has a chance to contend. And if you want more money, go out and win it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what you said before too about damaging your relationship with the New York fans is definitely right, man. I mean, fans start to look at you differently when you prioritize your own money or your own playing time over winning. I mean, we saw Jet fans turn on Elijah Moore, their wide receiver last year, because he started complaining about his catches during the middle of a 4-game winning streak, which, by the way, until last season, when the hell was the last time the Jets won 4 games in a row? So for this guy to start complaining about his catches in the middle of this winning streak pissed a lot of people off. And it's going to do the same thing for Giant fans this year if Saquon and the Giants don't figure out a way to get this contract done, because Giant fans are ready to go out there and have another season where this team makes the playoffs. And if Saquon Barkley, comes up as a malcontent or throws a stick in the spokes of this season at all, it's going to take a lot for Giant fans to forgive him, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's gonna take a lot for him to forgive him, and it's in his best interest not to do that.
Yeah, take what you can get. If he could get a deal with the Giants done for around $10 million a year or whatever, just do it. I mean, I can totally understand Saquon and any other professional athlete wanting to get every dime that's due to them. I don't blame them at all for it. But you know what? When you're a guy like Saquon that is coming off, this is a guy who just had the ACL injury a couple of years ago. And yeah, he finally looked like Saquon last year. But I don't really blame the Giants for wanting to see him come back this year and be comparable, because especially in the NFL, running backs can lose it like that. I mean, look at Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook from Minnesota is a guy that had 1,000 yards last year. He was due $11 million this year, which is a lot of money to guys like us, but in the NFL, that's a decent salary. And, he just got cut because people don't view running backs like that anymore for that type of money. He's 27 years old. He's still in his prime. And if Saquon doesn't watch out, that could be him next.
Yeah, exactly. The NFL, it can go downhill quick in the NFL. And also a little thing about football, you might any of you have yet to see this documentary, this ESPN 30 for 30 titled Broke. I highly recommend watching this documentary. It just opens my eyes at how downfall it seems to happen. And I noticed it seems to happen a lot. There was athletes from various sports, but there seems to be a common theme with football players somehow, I guess, mismanaging their money or whatever it was they did.
Yeah, well,
The
I mean,
the
that's that is a very very good documentary. I haven't actually seen it yet. I've been wanting to watch it. I haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, I mean, when you see stuff like that, man, definitely recommend checking that out too.
yeah
And
yeah exactly.
and yeah,
But
and
by the way, I think
yeah,
if you have ESPN Plus, I think you could watch it. I think they have it on there. They have, if my memory's correct, they have every 30 for 30 they've made on there.
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. ESPN does pretty good with that. So you have to give
Yeah,
them credit there too.
yeah, definitely. And if tonight's game gets rained out or rain delay, you've got something perfect to watch during that rain delay.
Good point. Good point, everybody. Keep that in mind. And yeah, so we're coming down to the end here. But before we move on from this last topic, I did want to mention very, very sad news for the Jets, too, that Chuck Carr, the safety, that the Jets just traded for him a couple of weeks ago from the Baltimore Ravens. They got him for a 7th-round pick. He's a starting safety. He's one of those guys that could bounce back and forth between safety and linebacker. Well, unfortunately, the Jets went out and had to sign another safety yesterday because Chuck Clark is done for the year. Hurt his knee on the last day of OTAs last year for the last week for the Jets. So it always sucks when a guy. I was excited to see Chuck Carr play. This is a guy. He's a good safety. He's a hard hitter. He's a guy that is kind of like a Swiss Army knife that you could use in the defense. So very sad to see him go. But yeah, that's the thing with these OTAs, Dan. Right? Is that you just want to come out of these OTAs healthy, and unfortunately for the Jets, they ended up losing a pretty decent piece of their defense there.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of always gets nervous like that during football and during preseason games. You just hoping no one gets hurt going into the season during the off season. And I gotta say, it is you kind of feel bad sometimes when you see some of the injuries some of these football players have gone through. I remember watching this interview, I don't know, with SportsCenter or something, and they were interviewing this player Jim McMahon, and I guess all the hits he's taken during his football career. This guy looked like he was in like rough shape. I mean, for those of you who don't know who Jim McMahon is, he's probably one of the greats in football. I mean, people in Chicago look at him as like royalty. The '85 Bears were one of the most well-known sports teams in history, and it
Yeah,
was
no doubt about
kind
it.
of sad. It was sad seeing this interview when you were seeing this guy in the shape he was, and when he's speaking, it
Yeah,
it was just sad. It's just sad when you see these guys like that.
yeah, it's true, man. You're definitely right about that. I actually had the chance to interview Jim McMahon a couple of years back, and yeah, it was a tough interview. It was a tough interview. But he's a good guy, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. He had a tough career, and but like you said, those '85 Bears became like celebrities within themselves. So you had Sweetness, you had William the Refrigerator Perry, you had Jim McMahon as the quarterback. So they had a lot of stars, a lot of star power on that team. Not even mentioning the head coach everybody loved, Mike Ditka. So yeah, definitely got to tip your cap to those guys, and yeah, Jim McMahon. Unfortunately, it's a shame to see what happens to some of these guys who took a lot of those big hits earlier in their lives, and what it does to them now. So you just gotta love all these old football players because you don't know how long they're going to be around for, right?
Yeah, yep, exactly. And it's just you wish the best for them, and
Yeah, yeah,
gotta give a lot of give a lot of props to these players who made this decision to put themselves in the situation that voluntarily taking all these hits.
yeah. Yeah, man, they sacrificed their bodies. I was actually just listening to a great interview with my buddy Jake Asman, who does a great Jets page. If you ever have a chance to, if you're a big Jets fan and you want to see some great Jets content, check out the Jake Asman show on YouTube. The guy does a great job, and he just had former Jets um, defensive end Mike DeVito on, and it was really interesting seeing him talk about how during the playoffs, when the Jets were getting ready for the second AFC Championship game under Rex Ryan, when they were playing the Steelers in Pittsburgh, how he was talking about how he could get all the massages that he wanted. He could take all the steams and all the hot baths and the jacuzzis and all the stuff that he needed to help his body. But by that point, his body was so beat up that he could just not, he just didn't feel right. He could not get his body feeling back like normal. And just hearing him say that was really, really interesting because it just shows you what these guys put their bodies through on a weekly, a week in and week out basis for it. We always hear about how these guys feel like they got into a car accident the day after a game. And when you hear a guy like Mike DeVito talk about that, it really shows how it's true and how long it takes these guys to feel normal again.
Yeah, it is. So you gotta tip your caps to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Absolutely, man. So before we get out of here, though, do you have any plugs for yourself?
Sure, my Twitter page, Bobo103NYC. You can follow me on Twitter. You can also follow me on Instagram, Bobo718DK. Also, Daniel Curlin on YouTube for some Bobo content. And by the way, if you look on my social media pages, that little promo I put for this episode that you're watching right now, if you're asking about the band in that song, that was a song by Bandmate. I was just saying that's for letting me down. I figured just put one of the song titled "Don't Let Me Down," and search, go on YouTube, search Bandmate. Thank me later.
Exactly. Check that out. Check Bandmate out. Great band right there. And and if you want to check out our show, check us out on Twitter at bsith_podcast. You can check me out there too at my last name, Cramer NY. You can also check us out on Instagram at Best Seat in the House Podcast. And if you like the show here on YouTube, subscribe to us, give us a like, and if you think we've earned it, give us a 5-star review on the podcast as well for Apple and Spotify and everything else. And don't forget, if you haven't done it yet, if you have a Rumble, please subscribe to our Rumble. We would love to see everybody check us out there as well. So once again, thanks for tuning in this week. Episode 67 is in the books, as Howie Rose would say. And hey, before we get out of here, Dan, I think there's only one thing left to do. I'm Rob Cramer. You're Daniel Bobo Kirtland. This is the Best Seat in the House podcast. And let's go Mets. Let's go Mets.
Go Mets.
Let's go
Let's
Mets.
go
Let's go
Mets.
Mets. Let's do it.
Let's go Mets. Let's fucking go.
Fuck yeah. All right, everybody. We'll catch you next week on the Best Seat in the House podcast.